in everything we do. There's so much that we've already covered. I can't believe it. We actually did 6 sessions now, and so we've been studying the role of the temple and it plays in the Jewish spirituality. We noted the pattern of the temple. We talked about that, how it creates Jewish worship. Essentially, the structure, the prayers that were modeled after its services. We talked about how the temple is really all about God's presence. That's really what makes it special. That's what's unusual about it. That's the main feature. That's why the mountain is holy. The mountain is holy because God is there. And that's not something that sort of say we designed. It's something He designed. We talked about the temple being an exclusive center of divinely instituted sacrificial worship. I make this point from time to time that what God has wanted, and He clearly expressed His will in very clear way, that's how He wanted to be worshipped. He could have given us any system of worship He wanted, but that's how He wanted to be worshipped. And also, it is a place of ongoing spiritual renewal. I explained to you how the temple works in many ways, bringing us back to Hashem over and over, that we have these appointments with God, and the temple becomes a place where we can renew our commitment, we can refresh ourselves, we can come back. If we have fallen away, if we walked away, there is a mechanism for us to come back to the Lord, and that's built in there. So we've also noted the Messiah's connection to the temple. Didn't quite get into that as much. Maybe one of these days I'll explore it a little bit more, because there's actually so much between Messiah and the temple. There's this intricate connection. I talked primarily about the restoration of the temple and the role that Messiah plays in that. We also spoke about the desecration of the holy place by the wicked characters in prophecy. So we broached that topic a little bit. I told you, not my favorite topic. I don't really like to talk about things like that, but it's necessary to be mentioned at least in our broad strokes and ideas that we cover with the temple. Now, I will venture into some verses of the apostolic writings that have been traditionally used to suggest that the temple has been replaced, that it's no longer needed, and so on and so forth. So, some of you are very familiar with these verses, some of you are not familiar at all. Honestly, for me, it was kind of like a very interesting exercise when I sat down and I started looking at all the stuff that's out there that talks about these things. It kind of was a surprise to me. If you're not aware, many Christians' teachings that are drawn from the New Testament in particular often stress that with the coming of Messiah, the Jerusalem temple became irrelevant. The hope of its restoration is futile and misguided. Why would we need that? Because we have something that's so much better. Messiah came and changed the entire system. Everything was transformed. He is the temple. His body is the temple. His people, those who follow Him, are the temple. And God's presence now dwells with them as it used to dwell in Jerusalem temple. So, yeah, this is a full-on reworking of everything that you biblically know, basically. Because the temple, as I told you, it's in everything. Every Bible verse we pull up, it's there. Every chapter of the prophets you pull up, it's there. And now we're being told that all of that has changed. All of that is transformed. It makes sense why Christians don't actually study the Tanakh. Why? Because it's all so much focused on the very thing that they believed has been abolished and made irrelevant. So this new system of community of believers as the temple and Messiah, both being the sacrifice and the priest, is a much better system. In fact, it's perfect. It all works out for people. Now, people say that this is what God desired to replace when He wanted to replace the temple. When Jerusalem complex was destroyed in 70 CE, that's what God wanted. That's the model. He wanted to replace the spot, the place, the building, the institution with a bunch of people who all aspire to the same values and follow the Messiah, who is both the priest and a sacrifice. That's what people are going to tell you. And that's pretty much this is not a mischaracterization of a mainstream Christian teachings. I think I'm being very precise when I say these things, and many of you have heard these things before, taught in a variety of different ways. Whether you read books or watch YouTube videos, it doesn't really matter. You will hear this over and over and over in a variety of different ways. Maybe not said in exact words that I use, but the message is pretty much that. Now, I have a confession to make. When I started to look at the biblical verses traditionally used to support such ideas, I found way too many. I really did. And over the years, all these passages, so many passages were really co-opted to express the idea that the Jerusalem temple is meaningless, that its worship is undesirable to God, and is now forever abolished with Messiah's own seal of approval. Done. Now, if one looks carefully, it's really not hard to see through the twisting and the manipulation of these texts, because I'll throw these texts out for you. But this task, at going through these texts, made me realize how badly people want to displace the temple forever and find Bible verses, just anything to support their ideas. They were willing to stretch the meaning of so many verses so far to make their point. And I will start throwing these verses, and maybe you can come up with a few more. I tried to be as comprehensive as I can, but I was almost overwhelmed by how many. So it's a difficult task. I didn't really think it was going to be that hard for me, but I'm like, wow, this is so much. How do I deal with this? So to deal with the most of them, I had to break them up into groups. So I will begin with the Gospels and start with John. I do not know how far I'm going to get there because we might just get stuck there. John, why John? I'm beginning with John because John uses metaphorical and even very mystical language. And he's the favorite gospel to take very, very Jewish ideas and to twist them. And I can show you how. Because honestly, John is just more susceptible to being twisted because of the way it was written. Whenever you have poetry, whenever you have prophecy, you ever wondered why people take prophetic words like Isaiah and twist them to say, oh, this is happening here, this is happening there, or he's speaking about so-and-so. It's because poetry and being in a very, speaking in a very spiritual, metaphorical way, they're not concrete. And it's easy to take those words and twist them to mean whatever you want them to mean. So that's how, out of all the Gospels, John is like that. He speaks in very beautiful, flowery, metaphorical, spiritual language, and it just is more conducive to being twisted. So I'll start with John. John chapter 1, verse 14. You remember how it begins, right? The opening, the beginning was the Word, and was with God, and were with God, and then it says, and the Word became flesh, and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory of the one only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, most people do not have a question of who or what the Word is. Most people that figure this out, John gives us a setup. He gives us from the beginning that through this Word, God created the world, but then that Word became flesh. And that right there, that idea of this Word becoming flesh, and it says it dwelt among us. And the word skenosen is being used in Greek. And in Greek, this word literally means tented. The word broke out its tent in our midst. That's what it says. So people look at that language and they recognize that this is like a temple, tabernacle type language. Some people would say the word tabernacled among us, right? And that's a good translation. That's a nice way of putting it because that's what the Greek actually says. English dwelt doesn't just quite communicate that. There's a lot more in that. So we read this verse and we have no doubt who this is. Obviously it's talking about Messiah. He's coming into this world. He's manifesting himself full of God's glory. And so what do people take with this verse? What do they do with it? Well, the claim is this. Because John uses the language of tabernacle, tent, the Messiah's coming into the world takes the place of the tabernacle. He came to take it over. What dwelt in the physical place now dwells in Messiah's flesh. He embodied the tabernacle, and so that allows him to replace it. The Shekinah glory transfers to Messiah now. It dwells on him. Remember the story of him going into the waters and the Spirit like a dove coming, and behold is the Son in whom I'm pleased. So there you go. Here's God's Shekinah being transferred away from the temple and onto Yeshua. And he is the tabernacle now. So you might have heard this before. I don't know if you've seen this or not.
Almost say God became flesh.
Right. So, I mean, that's just, these are semantics, but what I want you to see is the replacement aspect here, right? That's what we're talking about. So here's my response. I mean, I could say it this way, that in John's opening, the Messiah is compared to the tabernacle because by coming into the world, he actually embodies God's tangible presence in the world that he made. God made this word through the word, right? He made the world. And then that word is now coming into the world and manifests God, his presence. And this act does not abolish or displace the temple. This is where people switch it up on you. They say, oh, okay, God coming into the world in this kind of way. Well, now the temple is no longer necessary. Why? Because we have that. Now, throughout John's stories, Jesus, he is full of God's presence. If you read it carefully, you will see. And yet, he participates in the temple worship all the time. Read your Bibles. John chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 10. He's always in about in the temple. In fact, John is probably the most temple-focused gospel of them all, because anywhere you read in John, Yeshua is always in, around, or about in the temple. He's like almost circling the temple the whole time, and occasionally goes inside and does something, and then he's out. Like, John tells you his story as if he never leaves Judea, which we know that's not how exactly happened, because he spent a lot of time in Galilee, but it is so temple-focused. Yet people say, okay, there you go. So, do I buy this claim? No, I can't buy this claim, but the people are going to make this claim. So, here's another one. John chapter 1, verse 51. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And the claim is that Jesus, the Son of Man, replaces Jacob's ladder and fulfills the function of connecting people to heaven. The temple, which is Beit El, the house of God, as a meeting place between God and mankind, is now replaced by Jesus, who becomes the point of such connection. So, Jacob's ladder. And he's replacing that. Why? Because upon the Son of Man, the angels ascend and descend. So, that's the claim now.
Rabbi,
Well, yes, go ahead.
what I'm finding very interesting is that as growing up as a Christian and even having gone to seminary and whatnot, all of this is very subtle, but when you point it out, it's so completely obvious.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's almost brainwashed.
You have to make the stretch. And you make the stretch time and time and time again, and in this place, and in this place, and in this place. And you make so many stretches, and you make it fit and work so many times, that after a while, you have no idea that you've been brainwashed into believing the stuff that actually has no foundation. Because if you read every one of these verses in context, and reading this in context will absolutely destroy whatever people believe about it, by the way. The secret to not buying this stuff is very simple. Read the verses in context. You will know they have nothing to do with the stuff that people tell you they do have to do with, because they're actually not even addressing the same topic. Because the topic that people want to address is temple is destroyed, it's all obliterated, it's irrelevant, it's displeasing to God, and of course, why would anyone would ever want to restore it or see it come back? And so, if that's what people believe, these verses are being stretched to say that, but you start reading the context and you say, wait a minute, it's not talking about that. So here is the Jacob's ladder. Now, I'm going to take you to the context. Context of John and then also context of Jacob's ladder. Genesis 28, those of you who know the story, Jacob receives the vision of the stairway as a response to his prayer for God's direct presence in his life and protection of him. That's what he wants. He's running away from his brother and says, God, if you're going to be with me, I'm going to give you a tenth of everything I have. And I'm going to pray to you every single day of my life and bless your name, because you are that kind of God who protects me. So he prays for that, and then God gives him a dream, reveals himself, shows him the fact that, yes, I am with you. So his response to the vision is this house of God, this temple language, this ladder, this stairway, and he sees the angels coming up and down. And so in Jewish tradition, of course, that connects the story to the temple. you understand the house of God, the language, like we connect these dots. So of course people grab onto that and say, there you go, Yeshua replaces that. So in John, Yeshua claims that God's presence, which was given to Jacob in Genesis 28, because that's what he asked for, angels going up and down, will be seen with the Son of Man, the Messiah. You will see that with the Messiah, just like Jacob has experienced it, Messiah is going to experience it. It's a sign that God is with him. Just as it is in Genesis, that's a sign, so it is in John. It's a sign. And Yeshua's words have absolutely nothing to do with elimination of the sacred place or its relocation or anything like that. Messiah actually comes to enhance the people's access to God, not to confine that access to himself and make it locked away in him. Because now he is that stairway, essentially. Do you see how that's a problem? And now the question, of course, is Jacob's letter about that? And is the story in the Gospel of John anything that has to do with the temple? And of course the answer is no. It's taking that, ripping that text out of context and making it fit into an idea that you want to plant into people's heads. And now you're going to do this over and over and over again. And that's how you're going to make people believe it. Because you're going to inundate their lives with it. So we keep going. We're still in John. I haven't gotten out of places. Look at this. Jesus answered them, destroy this temple in 3 days and I will raise it up. But he was speaking of the temple of his body. John 2:19. Now the claim is Jesus' body is the temple. Divine presence now rests on him exclusively. Didn't he just say, my body is the temple? Like, yeah, he did say that. But is that what he truly meant? What he meant is that he's replacing the temple, he himself right now? Is that the claim? You have to examine these claims by simply just unwrapping it a little bit more. Now, it's very important for us to understand that Yeshua often speaks by employing prophetic symbolism. It is very common. Here he uses language of analogy. Analogy is all over the Gospels. Why? Because we always compare things to other things. Now, he's not claiming that he is actually the replacement of the temple, is what I want you to see. That is not the claim. I mean, people would say that that's what those verses mean, but he's not saying that. At his trial, false witnesses gave testimony that he threatened to destroy the Jerusalem temple. You can read those passages. I gave you the citations right there. They literally, false witnesses came and accused him of what? That he said he's going to destroy the temple. We should kill this guy. He's dangerous. He's a revolutionary. He's crazy. We need to take care of him. Now, he never claimed to replace it. So the false witnesses testified that he promised he will destroy it. They never said, oh, he promised he will replace it too with himself, out of all things. Now, clearly, they did not hear him say that he was the temple. And these people were supposedly there. They heard him say it multiple times in his teaching. That would have been even a better claim to answer for if you're standing in judgment before priests who are going to try you for all these crimes. Now, that would have been an accusation. It would be hard to change this. The guy's going to destroy the temple. You can threaten things when you want, but when you say, I am the temple, well, that's a whole new level of a claim. So he didn't claim that. Why? Because even the people who wanted to accuse him and lie about him so he could be convicted to death, they didn't even come up with such a crazy idea. But people who read that verse in John 2:19, they actually come up with the idea that his body is the temple. That means he is the temple. And so what else do we need? Why do we need the temple when we have him? I'm still traveling through John with you. John chapter 4. Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. But an hour is coming, and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And the claim on this verse is very simple. But Jesus, the geographic location of the temple as a place of worship in Jerusalem does not matter any more than the Samaritan mountain. Spiritual worship replaces any physical worship, and the locations of the temple do not matter in such a reality. So people take this verse, this conversation with the Samaritan woman, and they make it all about the temple and how the temple is now illegitimate, irrelevant. The fact that it's in Jerusalem and Samaria, who cares? It doesn't really matter because the real spiritual worship, it doesn't matter where it is. Oh, it mattered to God, big deal. You know, there's all these verses in the Bible scattered everywhere, except in the Gospels we have something that could be used to say otherwise. So people make this claim, and on this verse, on this conversation, they build this idea that the location of the temple is not important. Spiritual worship happens anywhere. Now in John 4, Yeshua is addressing a very sensitive Samaritan Jewish controversy over the proper location. That's what they disagreed on. Mount Gerizim or Jerusalem. And they fought over it. And believe it or not, people actually died because of this stuff. There was violence. There was both sides over where's the right place to worship. So to establish a common ground, because Yeshua does not want to bring more dissent, more violence, more arguing, he wants to establish a common ground between Jews and Samaritans. So he's prophesying about an age when God's presence will fill the whole earth, making geographic disputes small and irrelevant, because the whole world will be overtaken by God's glory and presence. Now, so he makes that prophetic assertion, and then people say, wait a minute, he's delegitimizing the temple. Well, the explanation that God's temple and his presence, it's not abolition of a Jerusalem temple. That's not what it's talking about. Because then in the same breath, Yeshua tells them that salvation is from the Judeans or from Jews, not Samaritans, by the way. He just kind of drops it and reminds them, by the way, you should remember, you know, all these things I said are nice and good, but don't forget, salvation is from Jews.
He only prophesies two things. In the first part of that, he's prophesying about the destruction
Right.
and the diaspora, because you won't be here.
Right.
You won't be here to worship at either place.
Stop fighting everything.
Right. And then the next part, I think, is the prophecy of the Olam Haba. Right.
Exactly. So there's the expansion, is what I want you to realize, that just because he says that there's going to come a time when not just here and not just there, but everywhere, true people who truly connect with God, they're going to connect with him in a very heartfelt way. And it's not about this spot or that spot. When he says that, he's really talking about the expansion of God's presence. Not about, oh, this is not the spot, that's not the spot. I am the guy who makes it all happen. I'm the letter of Jacob. I am the body, the temple. I'm everything.
All these passages that you're pulling up are really prophetic based off of the passage you gave us last week when we talked about the replacement. He's prophesying that the time has come when he says the time of judgment is here, repent.
Yeah.
So that these things would happen. We go back to that passage. I can't remember the passage you used last week, but they all tie in. And this passage is Psalm 67 that we pray for 49 days during counting the Omer, that when the earth has fulfilled its glory, the people have come to the full consciousness of God, then the earth will have fulfilled its purpose, and the glory of God would be revealed throughout the earth. And the one before this was Psalm 51, that the people, Christians try to use, that the temple was destroyed, that he says, oh, you don't desire sacrifice, you desire a broken heart. But at the end of that psalm it says, when we are brokenhearted, then we can lift up the sacrifices on the altar, and Jerusalem would be rebuilt.
Then all of a sudden he wants it.
Yeah.
When our heart is right, he's okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two places in time in those same comments.
Listen, the gospel stories, they're multi-layered. They're very, very interesting. We have to study them the same way we study Torah on multiple levels. There's always the Peshat, there's always the Darash, there's always the Remez. We have to take it on those levels. And that's, but people just look at it and say, oh, this is what it's about. I'm sorry. That's not what this passage is about. It is about so much more. But again, this is just one of many passages that people use to spin the idea that the temple is abolished, destroyed, and irrelevant, and never to be rebuilt. All right, we're finding out of John. Matthew. Therefore, I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing the fruit of it. You heard that one. So this is Matthew 21. And the claim is that God transfers the kingdom from Jews to Gentiles, to the church, the people who are producing the fruit of the kingdom. So here, Jesus supposedly prophetically announces that the Jewish covenant privileges are now revoked. The temple worship is no longer legitimate. Why? Because I'm done with you. You failed me too many times. I'm done. That's it. See how this verse is problematic? Oh, I can't tell you how many times these words were used by anti-Semites to explain this.
Turn into Darth Vader instead of who we
Yeah. Let me highlight what's really important in this verse. I want you to see something, and this is the reason why people get away with this all the time. It says that the kingdom will be taken away from you and given to a people. And the Greek word uses here is ethne. This is where we get the word ethnic from. Okay, ethne literally means nations or peoples or people groups. And this is where people get stuck on. They see that word ethne, which by the way, most of the time is translated as Gentiles. So I totally get it how they could possibly go in that direction. The language kind of sort of can mislead you, but you really have to ignore all of the context of these verses to get there, to arrive there. I mean, you really would have to read that verse alone and that verse stand by itself and just ignore the whole entire chapter. Let me unpack it. By plural you, when he says you, Yeshua addresses the temple leadership. Those who are in charge, not Jews in general. When he says you, he's not speaking to the people of Israel. He's speaking about you, people who run things. You could see Matthew 21:45 for the audience clarification in context. Again, read outside of that verse and all of a sudden you realize who he's talking to because it actually tells you in verse 45 who exactly he is talking to. It names the people. Ethnos is a Greek word that can refer to any people, not just Gentiles exclusively. I realize that it gets translated as the word Gentiles, but so is, Israel called Goy Kadosh. A holy Goy, right? A holy people, right? I mean, it's in Hebrew we say that. We even chant it during our prayers. Goy, Goy, Goy Kadosh. I know you're laughing because you know the context in which the word Goy is being used in the synagogue language. It's almost used in sometimes a very derogatory way, right? But I'm sorry. Abraham is called, I'm going to make you a Goy Kadosh. That's what the Torah says. Now you argue with Torah, I have a problem with that. So, it's not Gentiles exclusively. The people producing fruit could refer to faithful Jews as much as it can refer to anyone else, is what I'm trying to say. It's a generic word. So, to clarify the saying message here, what is this message? What is the general teaching actually says? Read the broader context. If you just read that whole entire section, you will see that in Matthew 21, verses 33 through 44, Israel, the Jewish people, are the vineyard. He tells you a parable. And Israel is the vineyard. And the wicked farmers who are expelled are those individuals who are put in charge. In charge of what? In charge of the vineyard. In charge of Israel. So guess what? When he says, I tell you, he's not speaking to Israel, who's the vineyard. He's speaking to the farmers who are mismanaging that land and that vineyard and abusing it. So he says, it will be taken away from you who are running it right now. Now, once you unpack the context, all of a sudden you realize that verse cannot possibly be used in that way. Because now the context just defies that.
Which is just a repetition of the other prophets, like in Micah, where it's condemning the priests for not doing what they're supposed to do. It falls in line with all that came before it.
The tradition of the prophets is quite an expansive tradition of criticism of Israel's leaders of all sorts. And the prophets did that all the time, and Yeshua is no different. He falls in line with the prophets in the fact that he criticizes the temple authorities, he criticizes all the governance of Israel. They're saying, you're misleading the people, you're abusing them, you're making them suffer, you're doing this, you're doing that. That's not unusual. So to see him in the gospel say these kinds of harsh things sometimes, and he says, look, it's going to be taken away from you. Somebody else is going to be, because you won't be allowed to manage it.
Could this be, it's not written, but could it be directly to the ones that are not true Aaron from the house, not true Cohen because they've been replaced by?
Well, of course, there are priests in there who are not even qualified
Right,
to be the
so-
priests under the normal
right,
circumstances,
so
just
it's
bribe
just-
their way into the
Yeah,
office.
so
Yes,
we're putting it back to the promise that Hashem gave to Aaron and to Pinchas to have a
Sure.
lineage that is pure in the Cohen seed.
You can take it that way, or you can just read it more generically as you people messed up because you're terrible managers of what's been given to you.
Yeah, because the very next verse, verse 45, when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard this parable, they perceived that he spoke about
Like
them.
I said, the audience is in the Bible. It tells you who is talking. It tells you who the you is. It's a
Next
plural
verse,
you.
Last verse in that chapter, when they sought to seize him, they feared the multitudes, the
Right.
people, because they considered him to be a prophet.
So the people are on his side, but the leadership are
The
not.
people of Israel are on his side.
You see what I'm saying? So you can spin this, but the only way you can spin it is by plucking that verse out of context. The moment you start reading in context, all of a sudden, it doesn't say that. Certainly. Yes.
Well, because of the way it, traditionally or like commonly Christian stuff that is not correct, like you're saying. We also get a little sensitive about it too on our side, like, you know. But he is speaking to the leadership and they're not, he's angry and they're doing it wrong.
Yes.
But that's also true for centuries. Like read Amos. He had some very severe things to say. He goes through all the nations and tells them why they're God's angry with them, and then
Yeah.
he talks about Israel and Judah, and he's got complaints about why God is angry with them too. Like
Yeah.
it's also in the Old Testament.
Absolutely.
It's not a new thing.
It's not. No, it's not a new thing. This is something that's been going on, and if Hashem wills it, we'll continue to have a freedom of speech. We'll still continue speaking against our government as well too. When they're wrong and they are abusing people and doing terrible things, we'll be able to speak up. So hopefully nobody will take that right away from us in this country. So we keep praying because it's happening in other places in the world, but here we still have that freedom. So I want you to see how people twist the verses to say something they don't really say. And I could do this for hours, ladies and gentlemen. And in fact, I'm going to give you a sampling today. I don't think I'm going to go beyond the Gospels today. I still got Hebrews. I still got all of the letters of the Paul, and I still got Revelation. I got other places to show you where people take verses out of those places too and make them say that. You know, it's the same technique in every single space. Take the verse out of context, twist it to say something it doesn't say, and make it sound believable, and spin it on people so many times that they actually believe it.
If we don't get there in time, we may need to fast forward to Hebrews on Shabbat Shabbat.
Yeah,
Because there's
exactly.
so many things that people have on Yom Kippur they get completely wrong because they don't understand what's being said.
Yeah, I might hit that. Oh, so next time we'll hit that. So by the Shabbat Shabbat we'll get there. I promise you. So here's Mark 11. And he began to drive out those who were buying and selling in the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers. And he taught and said to them, "It is not written, my house shall be called the house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it robbers' den." And the claim is that Jesus condemns the entire temple system as corrupt and broken. The cleansing symbolizes the end of the sacrificial worship, a judgment and a rebuke from Messiah himself. God desires the prayers of the nations most, and that's what they are undoing, not allowing it to be a house of prayer for all people by putting commerce in there.
If he was now the temple, why would he care what they were doing?
Don't make that logical. You can't do that. Forget what I said earlier. Buy this right now. Believe this right now. Because if that line didn't work on you, this one will work on you. Yeah, you can have the Brooklyn Bridge too. I'll make you a good deal. You see what people do with this. Now, is this a terrible passage? Is it a tough one to deal with? Yes, it's a tough one to deal with. You got to figure out what's going on in this passage. But is this not the prophetic zeal that we're used to see? As we've said, Amos, read it. I mean, it's like, does God chastise the prophets and leaders of Israel all the time? So here, Yeshua is actually quoting. He's quoting from Isaiah 56:7, and he's quoting from Jeremiah 7:11. And he blends those two texts together and kind of systematizes it and says it in one pithy little way. And so both of these texts call for what? If you read the context of Isaiah 56:7 and Jeremiah 7:11, they call for temple purification, not destruction or abolition. Let's put it that way. So to use those texts and say this is what he meant, that means you have to be completely oblivious of what Isaiah and Jeremiah actually do say. So he's definitely not destroying or wrecking the temple. People would say, oh, he went into the temple, start turning on the tables, you know. Next thing you know, he's laying sticks of dynamite or something like that. No, that's not what he's doing. He's upset. He's clearly upset. He's cleansing the temple because he sees corruption. Now, if the temple is not a legitimate place of worship, then why does he passionately defend the sanctity of the temple and takes actions to restore its proper function? If the temple is not necessary, if he is the temple, then why bother cleanse it? Why? No, he's very upset about it. He's very passionate about it. And afterward, in Mark, in the same exact Gospels, Yeshua continues to teach in the temple. Look it up. Mark 11:27, 12:35. He's back in the temple teaching again. Now again, not logical. If it's so legitimate and terrible and awful and should be destroyed, then why do I keep going back to it and teaching there?
An argument that might be said is that he hasn't died and resurrected yet.
Okay, yeah. And we'll get to that one too.
This is also in context, like in verse 9 of Mark 11, those who went in front and followed out cried out, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David that is coming in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. So,
That happens right in the temple court. And that's why people get upset. They get upset. This is with the leadership, the authorities of the temple, when that happens in the he tells them, they tell him, stop them from saying this. And remember how he responds. He says, I can't stop them. I can't. So there's a drama going on here. And I think the drama is grossly misunderstood.
and it's the schizophrenic reading of schizophrenic Israel. Like 1 minute he's the king, the next minute crucify the guy.
Crucify the guy, yeah. It's schizophrenic Israel. Yeah, you see that. So that's again, that's just, this is how people read the Gospels. Okay, that's all right. You know, maybe our doors are open. People can come and study it. Let me respond. Here's another one. This is Matthew 12:6. You know this one. The disciples pick grain while walking through the fields. They get chastised for doing it on the Sabbath. And the rabbi defends them. He stands up for his disciples, saying the Shabbat is made for mankind. Then he says, by the way, the priests violate Shabbat with their service, because, you know, bringing sacrifice, you do all kinds of things you're not supposed to do on Shabbat, but they're okay. So then comes the claim. Out of all that comes the claim. And the verse that they're talking about, but I say unto you that something greater than the temple is here. And the claim is, Jesus declares himself superior to the temple. He is the divine replacement for the temple. He is even the Lord of the Sabbath, and he can change its laws for his followers if he wants to. Why? Because he's the guy in charge. He's the Lord, right? He can do that. Now, what people grab onto is these words. But I say to you that something greater than the temple, meson tu heru, is here in Greek. That phrase, greater than the temple. I'm so glad that it was preserved in Greek, by the way, because it makes it so much more explicit in English. If they said everything in English, I'll be so confused. But Greek helps. And I'll tell you why. Greek is a stubborn language. It has grammar, it has genders, it is masculine, it has feminine, and it has neuter. And they translated it right. I say to you, something greater here. So first of all, the greater teaching here is about the rules of Shabbat, not the temple. Read the whole passage, and you'll realize it's not about the temple, it's about Shabbat. The temple comes up as an example amidst the explanation. So they start citing situations, illustrating things, and the temple comes up into that conversation because of that. So it's really not even about the temple. Second, notice that Yeshua says something greater, not someone. I don't know if you wonder about this. So if he is greater, then why does he refer to himself in the neuter gender? Makes no sense, like I told you, but the grammar does not lie. It's there. And thirdly, if this teaching abolishes the temple, then something greater than Jonah and Solomon, which is, by the way, in verses 41 and 42, they are also abolished. Jonah is abolished, and so is Solomon. And if you're going to make this to mean that's what it means, then you're going to have to make it consistently. And within the same chapter, he also says that something greater than Jonah is here, and something greater than Solomon is here. So you're going to have to apply that something greater logic now to other things. And while people are okay abolishing the temple, they're not so great about abolishing Solomon or Jonah and all other things. Or it makes no sense after that. If the analogy falls apart is what I'm trying to tell you. So the something that he speaks of, here's the secret. It's chesed. It's God's mercy. In Greek, helios is a neuter gender noun. God's mercy, the way you say it in Greek, it's a neuter. All nouns have genders. I mean, if you speak languages that are inflected with genders, you would understand what I mean. It's not that mercy is masculine or feminine. It has a neuter ending, and therefore it is neuter. And so when I refer to something neuter, I attach neuter endings to those words to correspond to that. So if I'm going to say that something is greater here, I'm referring, and that something has to be in a neuter gender, and that something is clearly not Yeshua. It is God's mercy. That's what he talks about. Hence, it's not someone. Otherwise, the text would have said someone greater is here. Now, Yeshua continues to worship in the temple throughout his entire ministry. You could read this in Luke 19:47. The disciples continue to worship after the resurrection, by the way. Look it up. Acts 2:46, Acts 3:1. Like you asked me about the what about after the resurrection. Guess what? They didn't get the memo. Because they kept showing up to the temple. Like if they didn't get the memo during the gospel time when he said, I am it, there is no temple, my body, the temple, it's all about me, I'm the ladder, I am this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. So if that's what that means, and they were too thick to get it during that time, then certainly after the resurrection and the Holy Spirit comes upon them, certainly they would have a revelation of understanding that, right? No, they didn't get the memo. They keep showing up at the temple. Even people like Paul who have a vision of Yeshua end up going to the temple and sacrificing, and even paying for other people's sacrifices. How about that?
I've been told the response to that is that it was such a habit of theirs, and they just couldn't let it go.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I've been hearing. Oh, my God.
Yeah, habitual temple worship.
It's
okay. It's all right. I get it. You know what? That's fine. People can spend it all they want. The problem is, all of these verses that I'm showing you, they all have to be taken out of context in order for them to actually say what they're trying to make them say. The moment we start reading them in context, they read very differently. If you're interested in this teaching, this is actually a very, very deep teaching that takes me, I am cutting it short for you because I'm kind of summarizing everything really, really quickly to just show you the tops. If you're interested, on my website I have a teaching. It's called Sign of Jonah and Something Greater. I take like 3 or 4 hours explaining that whole entire chapter 12 of Matthew and just taking you verse by verse, explaining, showing you the gender, showing you the Greek, how it works and what's what. It's much more complicated than that, but people want to make it simple, and so of course Yeshua came and the temple was out because he is it. That's what people want you to believe. That's the claims they want to make. Here's another one. Matthew 27. Now, in Matthew 27:51, in Mark 15:38, and in Luke 23:45, they all describe how when Messiah died, the temple veil in the holy place tore. They all say the same story. I'm just using Matthew for my example. It says, and behold, the veil of the temple was torn into from top to bottom. You all know the story. You read the passage. You know what I'm talking about. And the claim is this, or something like this. I realize that sometimes I may misrepresent the claim. I'm not very astute, but I'm trying to say the things that I heard people claim about that verse. I could be very detailed and probably go through some of these commentaries and give you footnotes and page numbers, but I don't want to spend the time on this nonsense. So, claim is this. God himself tore the veil, symbolically ending the temple system. That's what it's supposed to mean. He abolished the barrier between the holy and the common. That's the temple, that's that veil, that's what it's supposed to represent, right? So the priestly mediation was forever replaced with direct access to God. And that's where people sing about Holy of Holies, and they're coming in and they're waltzing in and cozying up to God. That's where all this stuff comes in. Now, I want you to realize there's so much more going on there, but you have to know a little bit more about the temple and a little bit more about the culture and what means what. Now, it was not about a public witness, by the way. People imagine oh, everybody saw the temple veil torn in pieces now. Only a few priests on duty could see the veil because nobody else was going to enter that room to begin with. Besides the veil, there were many heavy doors that separated people from the holy place in the temple. To get to the veil, you had to go through massive, and I mean massive, metal doors that took multiple people to move. And so the torn veil represents God's grief over the death of the righteous one. You may not know this, but in Jewish tradition, tearing a fabric is symbolic of mourning.
Right.
When somebody tears a fabric, what they're saying is, I'm in mourning.
Right.
I'm heartbroken. How many times, I'm not going to take you to the verses because the verses are all over the Bible where it tells us actually to rend your hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Tear them. Tear them. Why? Because tearing the fabric is what we normally do when we cry and we mourn and we repent. So since the temple is the embassy of heaven, it is decorated accordingly, by the way. Everything in the temple represents a heavenly realm. Remember, Moshe goes to God. He's given the pattern of the heavenly temple, and he says, build something like that over here. And he does that. So since the temple is the embassy of heaven, decorated with all the accoutrements of heavenly temple, then such sign, what it points to cosmic mourning. God is mourning what happened. That's what's going on. And people take that and say, oh, there you go. Therefore, that means the priesthood is done, the temple is over, God is angry. There you go. So the Talmud, by the way, records very similar phenomena. That's a whole different story that I can tell you. There's 40 years before the destruction of the temple, it says that the doors of the sanctuary opened by themselves. Those doors cannot possibly open themselves. The wind cannot open them. People cannot open them. It will take multiple people to open those doors. Yet the doors would swing open all the time. It says that the light of menorah would go out all the time. And the priest would relight it, turn around, walk away, it'll go out. They'll relight it, they'll turn around, walk away, it will go out. And then they would start crying out and saying, Lord, what is happening? You're clearly trying to show us a sign that something is happening here. And yes, it is a prophetic vision. So the veil tearing is just yet another sign of what it is, but it's a very specific sign. It's a sign of mourning because it happened at the moment of death. And I hope you can see that. Now again, it takes knowing a little bit of culture to understand this connection. Yes, Andrew.
So one of the teachings and things that I've come across is that it is not the Holy of Holies that was torn because it is two curtains that are not complete. You go in one side, come out the other. It was actually the curtain at the front of the temple because embroidered in it was the heavenlies, a duplicate position of it, and that is not the Holy of Holies because there is two veils at the Holy of Holies, again, not complete. You go on one side and come out the other. And so
people kind of enter between the veils. Now there's multiple veils. As from my understanding of studying the structure of the temple, and we have a little bit of a conflicting information because we have the Talmud recording some of the sources. We have Josephus recording some of the very interesting sources. Why? Because he was a priest and he knew what was happening, right? So he was kind of privy to some of these things. And so the only people who would actually know the inner work of the temple building are the people who are allowed in the temple building, and you have to be a descendant of Aharon in order to even set foot into that place. And there were some priests who were charged with upkeep and rebuilding and maintenance, and that was their job. That's what they were actually doing. They were to make sure that everything is clean and pretty and beautiful and works and functioning, and so they knew these things. But we have a lot of conflicting reports about that, and so today people try to reconstruct what the temple looked like, and we're still a little bit confused about it because the records that have survived to our day, they're not complete and they're not exact. We're very technical people today, but back then they were not as technical as we are, and they didn't describe things as precisely. And of course everybody's relying on memory, and then things get lost in translation and so on and so forth. But it's fascinating to think about this. There are multiple doors and there are multiple veils, and so people will speculate and they'll make it sound like if that's it. The veil torn and you could see straight into the Holy of Holies, like boom, like direct view. No, nobody got to see into the Holy of Holies except the priest who was there in that place, because there were multiple doors to go through before you even got there. I want you to see this, and again, people take these texts and they twist them into meaning, saying that the temple is done, it's finished, still delegitimized, all the gatekeeping that existed. And people have this idea that that God's presence was somehow gatekept by the temple. Remember I told you the one fundamental misunderstanding that people have that breaks everything down is that people think that the temple and sacrifices actually was the means by which Israel communed with God. When you buy that and then that is destroyed, then I just destroyed your faith. But I tell you the truth, that's not how it has been for Jewish people. Temple has never been the means, because throughout our history we have lived without the temple longer than with the temple. And yet here we are, still around, and still reading the same holy words, and still holding on to the same truths and traditions and ideas have been passed on from our ancestors. So, how much does the temple play a role in our life? It's a big hole that's missing. Today in Jerusalem, in many homes, if you were to walk into people's home, you might observe a strange phenomenon. The room would be finished, beautifully decorated, and somewhere in a corner, you will see a missing brick, a stone missing from a wall. In observant homes, people deliberately choose to not finish their home completely by exposing a piece of a wall, just raw stone sticking out, gone. And you're saying, what's wrong? You forgot to put that in? And the answer is no, until the temple is rebuilt. Our lives cannot be complete. We have a hole in the wall with which we're living all the time as a reminder that something is missing in our lives. And that has been that way for generations and generations and generations. That hope and that prayer has not left us. And hopefully you could see this in the words of Isidore. They reflect that very much so. But people don't understand that. They don't understand how important and how central it is. They want to replace everything with one single thing. Okay? And not replace it. Now I understand the desire, but I think it's a very misguided desire. And as far as it comes to Jewish people and our well-being, that's a very dangerous thing. Because the more people believe that, the more we don't need to exist at all. In fact, our existence becomes a very uncomfortable nuisance because we keep reminding people these inconvenient truths that would have been forgotten if we weren't there reminding them about it. So it's a tough one. But I still got a bunch of passages from Hebrews and Paul and all these other places because we're not done. Because I know you're going to ask me questions and I can't answer them because some of that stuff in the Hebrews and in some of the letters, there's more, is what I'm trying to tell you. I just had to say, okay, this is how much I can squeeze into 1 hour, and that's it. So we will continue studying that. Is this interesting to you? You want to look at this? All right, so sometimes knowing the lies, it helps. I was told that when they train agents to recognize counterfeit money, is they make them handle a lot of real money. They never show them counterfeits. They just give them real stuff. So when the counterfeit comes across them, they can spot it like that because they've handled so much of the real stuff. They know the fake when they see it.
When I first started working, I was working, and I held my cash all the time. It was a feel, like you could feel it when it was.
Exactly.
I got counterfeits, I could tell.
You can tell right away?
Because real money is made out of cloth,
Right.
and most of the other is kind of a paper in some way. And you can actually it's very difficult to tear money apart. You
Yeah.
can do it, that's hard.
They're very
But
terrible.
the fake kind can tear easily.
So there you go. So this is kind of the technique. We're using the same technique. And there are a lot of these verses that have been twisted and turned in various ways. But the more you know the truth, the more obvious it becomes. All right, so we'll have fun with that. Continue on. All right, it's time for Kiddush.